As I often point out in my campus speeches, womanhood is a superpower. We are literally superheroes walking among you. It's not a costume or semantics or feelings. Yes, we can gestate, menstruate, and lactate, 3 things that men cannot do that are uniquely feminine. With me today to discuss authentic femininity is Riley Gaines, who you have seen probably everywhere on your social media feeds just the past couple months, as she is working to save women's sports. While competing in Kentucky, Riley actually tied Leah Thomas, a biological man, and was forced to surrender her trophy to him. Thomas swam competitively with women, thus stealing qualifying spots from female athletes and then also exposing himself in the female locker room without consent to 18 to 22-year-old teammates. So I am so excited today to have Riley on. There is a lot for us to talk about. Riley Gaines is a former competitive swimmer from Gallatin, Tennessee. She competed for the University of Kentucky NCAA swim team. She is best known for speaking out against the NCAA for allowing men to infiltrate women's sports. Riley, thank you for coming on today.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me on.
You are just like a female superhero. If the feminists had actual feminist organizations anymore, you would be getting their Woman of the Year award.
It's amazing to me, really, to see how that tide has turned. To see how these people went from embracing and honoring and recognizing and celebrating women based off of our own physical differences, our own ceilings, our own uniqueness compared to men. That was the whole movement. And now we're seeing that totally shift. And so I you can't almost help but laugh. It's almost comical.
It's almost comical. If it wasn't so sad, it's almost comical. I mean, you and I we aren't doing activism in the exact same sphere, but it is closely related because I would say that we're both fighting to save women. What we're doing at Students for Life is fighting to save preborn women from abortion, fighting to stand up for women who are being targeted by the abortion industry. You're fighting to stand up to say women shouldn't be erased. I think what's interesting is the amount of people who are out there, though, who kind of agree with your position, our position, that female is female and male is male, and no, men shouldn't be taking women's trophies and women's sports or exposing themselves in locker rooms. But I guess my first question would be for you is, what do you think it's like finally going to take for young women, particularly, to say, this is it, like enough, like no more of erasing me?
You know what? Unfortunately, I think it's going to take more people being directly impacted by this. And I hate that, which is why I think it's so important to talk about this, so important to get on those college campuses and show people what is at stake, what is happening. Because unfortunately, I had to be directly impacted before I realized the misogyny, before I realized how they were violating our privacy, violating our rights to safety, violating Title IX. It took me being slapped across the face to see it. And I want to avoid that as much as possible. I don't think it should take more girls being injured in their sport. I don't think it should take young girls being exploited in a locker room. And it certainly shouldn't take girls having to give up their scholarships and their spots on the podium and their titles and their roster spots to men before we see the harm in this, before politicians start changing the way they vote, especially, of course, not to make this issue political, it's inevitable, but especially the way the Democrats are handling this. Is it going to take more girls getting hurt? Is that what it's going to take before they acknowledge how this is a problem and how women are being treated in this situation?
Tell everybody the story of what happened to you in California at the end of the spring, because what happened to you, it happened like 2 days after Antifa. When I was at Virginia Commonwealth University, Antifa came into our room, assaulted some of our students. They had to shut down the event. We were trapped inside of a room for our own safety for multiple hours. And then 2 days later, I was watching like a live feed of something that happened to you in California. Can you tell everybody what happened?
Absolutely. I mean, it sounds like we went through something very similar. I was speaking, sharing my very real lived experience, nothing even really opinionated, exactly what happened to me and to my teammates and my competitors in regards to the unfair competition, in regards to the locker room, in regards to the silencing that we were dealing with. And I was sharing that. I was met with an ambush. These protesters, they entered the room, they turned off the lights, they rushed to the front, they assaulted myself and others in the room. And ultimately, that's where I was held for ransom for over 3.5 hours. These protesters, they were demanding money. They demanded that I paid them money if I wanted to make it home to see my family safe again. And the law enforcement who was present did nothing. The university did nothing. Actually, the university, after all of this happened, they released an email to their student body from the vice president of student affairs. Her name is Dr. Jamila Moore. She released an email saying, "We are so proud of our brave students. We applaud them for the manner that they treated Riley Gaines with. They were so peaceful in the way that she was here to spread this violence. And we know how troubling that can be. Here are some counseling resources for you students. We know how hard her presence is to handle, and we applaud you."
She applauded her students for kidnapping you, essentially, and holding you for ransom.
Yes, she applauded them.
I mean, this was interesting. That's very interesting when you said the police did nothing, because I thought it was just a campus police. So when we were at VCU, we had campus security and the city police, both who had done nothing and allowed this to happen. I went out, tried to get them to like come into the room to, interfere and stop what was happening. What was the police justification for not protecting you?
A lot of different things, but I think most importantly is that they didn't want to be seen as anything other than an ally to this community.
Yeah.
These protesters who
That's how afraid they are. The police is afraid of them.
It's this issue and the way I feel like as a society we've become either oppressor or oppressed, and the way we have demonized oppressor, which the qualifications for being an oppressor is being white, being especially a white male, being cis, being heterosexual. Those are what makes someone an oppressor, which is a terrifying thought in some people's mind. And so these police would rather help the oppressed than become the oppressor. That's the way I looked at it. That's the way I saw it firsthand. There was a lot of diversity in these protesters. One African American individual was saying, if you roughhouse me, then you're just a racist. You're in there protecting that white girl. Of course you are. And these officers, they were terrified of being called that name. Therefore, they did not effectively do their job, which is, of course, to protect. They failed miserably.
That's awful. I mean, it's awful to see it happen, and it's almost, I've had some people who have said, well, why do you continue to go onto college campuses? If you're going to face Antifa, you're going to face these violent threats. And it's, free speech is not going to be free if we allow these people, these big crybabies, essentially, to get their way. I mean, because that's essentially what they're trying to do. They're trying to shut down free speech. We are literally, by going and insisting on our presence and our voice being heard, we're ensuring free speech remains free for all throughout the country. But it's actually fighting it, which is sad, and putting our own selves in potential harm way. I hope this year when you're on campuses, you got a whole lot more security with you to deal with some of these situations.
I have definitely amped it up now. But again,
that's even sad too, because now you're to exercise free speech, you actually have to have money or an organization to back you to hire bodyguards to protect you.
Yeah. And that's the thing people don't realize. I think people think they're under this notion, at least these protesters in San Francisco, they're like, you're getting paid by the university to be here, therefore you have to pay us to leave. I was not getting paid by the university to be there. Make no mistake, that university probably would have paid me to not be there.
That's right.
There's a very false conception of how people think it works monetarily. They think I'm benefiting. They think this is not about me. I am not benefiting from this. I've stopped my life plans from what I thought I was going to be doing to really tackle this. Because again, I see what's at stake if someone doesn't. And it's bigger than just the fairness in women's sports piece. You're exactly right. the freedom of speech, the breakdown of faith, the breakdown of family, the silencing, the denying of objective truth. There's a lot of pieces of this outside of just the fairness in women's sports that are a really big deal that we're choosing to ignore. And actually, our administration, the people leading this country, that's the direction they want us to go. You would think freedom of speech would be bipartisan. You would think everyone would want the freedom of speech. But no, they don't. They want to control how you think. They want to control how you feel. They want to control what you say. And that is scary. And that is why I'm fighting this. That is why I'm continuing to go out, because no one will tell me how to feel. No one will make me apologize for feeling uncomfortable undressing feet away from a naked man. That is crazy. We cannot normalize that, because if we normalize that, there are no limits.
I think that's important too, because I often hear from my side of the stories when I talk about this, or when I was sharing, the feed from what was happening at University of San Francisco, UC San Francisco with you, or was it San Francisco State? Sorry. But I got a lot of flack from a few people that were, it's like, well, you're pro-life, you're anti-abortion, you need to stay in your lane. Don't ever talk about this transgender stuff. It's hurting the pro-life movement to talk about it. And I think it's really interesting, because what you said of this is bigger than the cult of transgender ideology. It's about freedom of speech. It's about the objective truth. And can we actually have a discussion in our nation about truth, and looking at a man like Leah Thomas to say that is a man with male parts who's exposing himself to young women in locker rooms, making young women feel and be in an unsafe place. I want to go into your Senate testimony just a little while ago. Can you share with us what you shared at the Senate, and what the reaction from the other side was?
Absolutely. So they had a Senate Judiciary hearing. The broad topic was about LGBTQ issues and embracing pride. So it's a very broad topic. So there was a lot of different subjects covered regarding gender affirming care, regarding the rise in violence, regarding, of course, women's sports. I was one of the 2 Republican witnesses to talk about my experience and how this has affected me and my teammates and my family, and really the general public, parents and young girls and men across the country. And so I shared what happened to me. I shared how I had trained my entire life to get to this national championships. It's the fastest meet in the world. I'm competing against the best of the best. And I had made it my goal to win a national title. 3 weeks before we were set to compete, the NCAA announced that Leah Thomas, who is a male, would be competing against us. Leah Thomas, the year prior, amongst the men, ranked 462nd at best. And so I saw the problem with this. Anyone with a brain would see the problem in this, but the NCAA did not. Actually, I think they did. I just think they didn't care. And so Thomas, that first day, swam to a national title, beating, again, Olympians, American record holders, the best of the world. That next day, Thomas and I raced, where ultimately we tied. We went the exact same time, down to the 100th of a second. And really what thrusted me into speaking out was, after tying, the NCAA official looked at both Thomas and myself and said, "Great job, but you guys tied. And we only have 1 trophy, and we're going to give this trophy to Leah. Leah has to have it for pictures, for photo purposes. We've been advised that no matter what, Leah holds the trophy. Riley, you can hold this other one, but you have to give yours back. Leah takes the trophy home, end of story. You go home empty-handed." And when again, back to being slapped across the face with this, that's when I realized I am done lying, because that's what they were asking us to do. By asking us to smile and accept this man onto our podium, that was asking us to lie. And I couldn't do it anymore. It was wild. And so I shared that at the Senate hearing. I shared how we all felt, the general consensus of what was how we were shocked, how we were betrayed, how we were belittled, how we were demeaned, and really how we were traumatized by this experience. And I was actually relatively surprised with the response. I think looking at me in the face, sharing my experience, even some Democrat senators, Senator Booker, Senator Durbin, they admitted that this was deplorable. and that this was an awful situation to be in. And I wasn't expecting them to admit that. But I think hearing the sincerity in my voice, hearing the battle that we're up against as women and the message that this is sending to young girls and women, you can't deny it. And if you do, you are not fit to be in any sort of position where you're making laws, because you're again denying the facts and the truth that is right in front of your face.
Yeah. And what can you just real quickly share? I think someone had asked, I think Senator Kennedy, one of my favorite senators from Louisiana, had asked a question about how do you know, like, surely men have advantages when competing in female sports. And I feel like the pro-abortion, pro-trans, intersexualism, she's a probably pro-abortion person, was like, there was no difference or something like that. But can you tell us if you feel in your experience, is there a difference between biological men and women when competing in sports?
Of course. So the conversation that was had was Senator Kennedy was asking Kelly Robinson, she's the president of the Human Rights Campaign, one of the Democrat witnesses, he was asking her, how many sexes are there? How many genders are there? She said there's 3 sexes and an infinite number of genders. To which he said, okay, among male and female, are there differences? To which she said, I first of all, I'm not a sports scientist, so I can't answer that. But I can say that there are men who think they could beat Serena Williams and they wouldn't even score a point. To which then Senator Kennedy said, Riley, how do you feel about this? To which I could very easily respond to what Kelly Robinson said. Serena and Venus Williams lost in a blowout to the 203rd ranked male tennis player. Of course they can beat men like Senator Joe Kennedy. Let's say Senator Joe Kennedy and Venus and Serena Williams are going against each other. I think we know.
I want to see that meme.
Yeah. And so if that's your argument, that's disingenuous to what sports is. Let's take people who have trained the same level, the same amount of time, man and woman, man wins every single time. And to ignore that, deny that, gives you no credibility in anything else you say. Everything else past that, if you can't admit men, on average, are taller, stronger, faster, more powerful, jump higher, the list goes on, then you have no legs to stand on.
That's right. That's absolutely right. Well, Riley, I know you have to go, but I just want to thank you for all that you're doing. Like I said, if there were actual feminist organizations that weren't hiding today from the transgender movement, you should be winning their Woman of the Year award. You have been such an incredible, courageous voice, and I'm so excited and so proud to see you out there speaking for truth and standing up to this cult. And I know the death threats and the hate that we get at Students for Life, and so I'm sure it's way worse for you. And so I just want to affirm you and thank you for all you're doing. How can folks follow your journey as you continue to speak out on this important issue?
Absolutely. My Twitter is Riley_Gaines_. I always try and post breaking stories. I always try to highlight how different politicians, state, federal, good or bad, how they're responding. So people don't believe this is a non-issue. That's what the narrative that the left loves to push. It's not happening. Why would we create a solution to a problem that doesn't exist? That couldn't be further from the truth. I get messages, as I'm sure you do. I get messages every day from people who are impacted by this, parents who call me crying, coaches who are silent, young girls who don't know what to do, who don't know who to talk to because they don't feel as if they can talk to anyone. And so that couldn't be further from the truth. And I try to highlight those things.
Thank you again, Riley. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and keep up your amazing work. And thank you all for tuning in today. Make sure you like and share this episode, and let's continue to promote the work that Riley Gaines is doing across the country, and speak up for fundamental truth that men can't be women. Bye, everyone.